MindGeek is a name of a company that owned it. However, the founding story is pretty crazy. And I don't know if you're a sci-fi guy or a fantasy guy, but in many fantasy book series, there's this concept, like in Lord of the Rings, there's the ring, or in Harry Potter, there's the Elder Wand. And it's an idea that there's these assets that are so powerful that people want to own it. But whenever you own it, your ownership's going to be very short-lived. It's almost that the item is too powerful. It sort of corrupts you and it puts a target on your back, and other people start coming for you.
It's a real sticky situation, one might say.
This is like, it's Game of Thrones, right? Everybody wants to sit on the Iron Throne, but when you're on the Iron Throne, you're not going to last very long. And so this is a Game of Thrones style story for tech that I went down a rabbit hole I want to share with you because I didn't know this story. So let me tell you how it went down. Okay, so we rewind the clock. We go back to 2005. Up until then, internet's been out for been semi-mainstream for 10 years. And of course, porn was popular right away. But the way that all porn sites worked was, it was like Yahoo. It was a directory of links. So you would go to jugworld.com, and it would just show you 100 links to places where you could go watch videos.
Not the videos, but to the other websites?
Links to other websites, or links to other photos, mostly photos at the time. It wasn't even that much video. So 2005, a big milestone happens, which is that YouTube launches. And YouTube launches with a pretty simple proposition, which is, we'll make it really easy to host a video online. You don't have to host it on your own servers. We'll host it on our servers. And then also, instead of just sending somebody that file, you send them just a link and they can watch it here. And we'll just have all the videos here in one place.
Which was mind-blowing.
Sounds so obvious now, but at the time was different. And if you haven't read it, go read the Sequoia memo of his investment, both his investment in YouTube, if you want to see how uncertain and how small and non-obvious this was at the beginning. So YouTube launches, it starts to get popular. Now there's copycats that come out in the porn version of this. RedTube, right? Just off of YouTube, RedTube. YouPorn, whatever. A bunch of these come out. And they're all flooded with pirated content. So they're just kind of like LimeWire back in the day. They just take, stuff that you're supposed to pay for, and they would just upload it for free on here. And they would have, banner ads to make money. And even though these were kind of sketchy websites, they were 10x better in every way. So it was more private, right? You didn't have to go anywhere. You could just have it in your bedroom. It was instantaneous, right? The distance between the craving, the fulfillment of the craving were one click away. There was infinite variety. So you didn't have to pick and choose. You could just keep going until you find what you like. There was infinite niches. And so people discovered that people were into all kinds of weird stuff because now there was a long tail of content and it was free, whereas most porn at the time was paid. Because at the time, there was somebody who was called the king of porn. He's the guy who was sitting on the Iron Throne at the time. And this was the CEO of Vivid Entertainment.
What was Vivid Entertainment?
They're like a Hollywood studio. They're making
porn or normal movies?
No, they're making porn, but they're making it in the Hollywood way, where there's an actress and there's a set and there's cameramen. There's
and people buy DVDs.
Yeah, buy the DVD. And so Vivid at the time was the king. This guy was known as the king of porn. He was written up in all these articles. In fact, the year that he was written up in all these articles is the same year these new disruptive websites came out, and revenue starts to fall, and it falls 50%, and it falls 80%, and it just basically goes down the drain.
How big was it?
It was doing tens of millions in revenue.
Okay.
But there were many studios like this. So they were the biggest one, but there was just like in Hollywood, there's many studios. All right. So I don't know if you remember, Google bought YouTube because YouTube was had a huge lawsuit from Viacom. These are parallel stories. YouTube was also flooded with pirated content. Because of that, they were getting sued like crazy. And because they were worried that they would go out of business, they sold to Google for $1.5 billion. At the same time, Vivid copies that playbook. They look at what Viacom's doing to YouTube. They start suing the crap out of all the website. And so the first owner of the throne, Vivid, goes down. Then the second owner of the throne, which was these RedTube and whatever, they start getting hammered as well because they're getting sued. All right, so who's the third one to pick up the baton? And where does Pornhub come into this? Okay, so at the time, there's 3 college students in Canada. And they realize that this is there's a lot of traffic to these websites. They meet, out of all things, at a competitive foosball tournament. And the guy who's the best foosball player, aka Chief Nerd, right, like Sir Dork, he happens to be the best programmer of the bunch. And he creates a live streaming video website to stream their foosball competitions. And there's not much of an audience for the foosball competitions, but he realizes as he's building all this video tech, he's like, hey, I think we could do the same thing for porn.
Was the intention porn or was the intention something else? And porn users use it most?
So these guys made the link site. So that site I talked about, Jug World, that's their site. But they made like 100 of these. They made like 100 directory sites, just links to other websites. Then they see the YouTube thing and they pick up this guy, Matt, I think his name is Matthew Keyser or something. Keyser is the guy who built the video streaming site and he's the best programmer. So he's like, I think I can make a YouTube for this stuff. And we can, instead of having these directories where we send the traffic away, we could just keep the traffic. And at the time, they had already kind of like, started to discover things. They're like, oh, people like this, people like this. They were just creating other directories. And eventually they looked at Vivid, who was the king at the time, and they were like, we should make our own Vivid. And so in the same office, they created Pornhub, the website that was going to host all this stuff. And they created a company called Brazzers, which is a producer of content. So they created a content producer and they created the platform, the network.
Like Netflix making their own shows.
Exactly. Or like, FTX had this, a sister company that, and by the way, nobody knew these companies were linked. So everybody thought these were two, not only unlinked companies, they thought they were enemies. Because at the time, all of the studios hated the platforms that were giving away the content for free. People didn't know that one of the biggest studios, was actually the owner of one of the biggest websites at the time. And so in the same way that there was FTX and Alameda living in the same house, kind of sharing funds, Brazzers and Pornhub were doing the same thing. People just didn't know. In fact, the guy came out and was like quoted. He was like, that would make no sense. Why would we do that? That would be 100% against our core interest as Brazzers to do that. We hate the platforms. And meanwhile, he was also the owner. So these guys start this thing and it takes off like a rocket. They're like, dude, we have no idea what we fell into. We were sleeping in the office. We worked every single day, every weekend. We couldn't hire enough. This was now like 2007 or 8, I think. So they weren't the first mover, but they ended up becoming the biggest mover. And here's why. So they basically scaled this thing better than anyone else could. And one of the keys was they had Brazzers. They had their own content that was not pirated, or like it was pirated, but they owned it. So they didn't care, that they could use on the network. So even when other stuff got taken down, they still had more content than other people.